Hey guys, All in Crypto here, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for another YouTube video. I hope you've all had a fantastic Friday so far. Today we're going to be diving into our daily cryptocurrency market update, and we've got some really interesting things to share with you. We're going to be going over a number of the main sort of news headlines within the cryptocurrency space, or about the cryptocurrency space, I should say. Some of them involving Amazon. We also have some comments from the BINANCE CEO talking about the fact that the tides are turning in regards to regulation, which we've spoken about consistently on this channel, that regulation is really going to unlock the next level of adoption as we see the likes of America and the UK and the rest of the world actually embrace crypto rather than fight it, but in their own constrained, dictatorial way. We will, of course, be diving into the charts, looking at Bitcoin. We're going to be looking at the dollar and Bitcoin because I'm going to be putting things into perspective. Yes, we're cautiously optimistic, and in fact, we think that the risk right now is to the downside, not the up. We're optimistic in the sense that we think crypto is going to do just fine in the long run. You know, crypto is the new system that is here to replace the old. And we're going to be talking about that. And what we're actually going to be doing is putting things into perspective because people look very doom and gloom on Bitcoin right now. But we're going to look at the dollar and where that was and where it's currently back at and give you some perspective because Bitcoin, the last time the dollar was at this sort of 100 mark, was around about sort of 4K. It's now still at 40. That is huge progress. And we'll really show you this to put things into perspective. This was shown to me by the crypto sniper or the market sniper Francis. Had a conversation with him yesterday that I'll be releasing on the weekend. Absolutely imperative that you guys understand some of the things that we're talking about. Very smart guy, a critical thinker within the space that clearly understands where it's going. And of course, we're going to dive into Bitcoin. So let's start the video off by looking at the overall markets. They are still down and we are going into the weekend. Weekends are quite a treacherous time period given the low volume. And often we see big moves occur on the weekend, typically a Sunday or if not a Monday. Which I know, of course, isn't the weekend, but they're quite famous days for the market, you know, making significant moves, typically to the downside. So I am very cautious this weekend, although very optimistic on the crypto space long term. Short term, you guys know the reasons why we're cautious. Bitcoin right now is at a pretty crucial level. We'll drop down the timeframes because of this pattern that you're in. And you are holding, you know, we had drawn way when we were up here. When we were up here, we had kind of said, look, you want to watch this 40K mark because it does look like an area that if we do come back inside this pattern that we had laid out for you, it is very likely that you're going to come down to it. And TA does work, and this is sort of credence of it. However, TA can go out the window. It's not always right. It's just a probability-based thing. And you can see just how you're holding and how many times you have held it. But my issue is that you're coming back, you know, and you're kind of hitting your head off it. You're hitting your head on the downside more than you're hitting your head on the upside, which for me is significant. And ultimately, you know, I think that may lead to a break. And then we're looking at these sort of lower levels down here as potential retest levels. You know, I think crypto right now, given the kind of macro backdrop of everything, is in a very turbulent time period. And I think ultimately, you know, we're just going to have to ride this one out. That's my ultimate thesis right now. You know, I think over the next 3 months, we're going to see a little bit of turbulence. As we see a huge correlation with the likes of the NASDAQ, we know essentially what is driving those markets and moving them at the moment. It's really monetary policy. You know, there's a far, far greater game being played that we are just a pawn in the crypto space. And understanding that is crucial. And look out for that video that I'm releasing on the weekend, guys. Let's talk and put some perspective on Bitcoin and crypto because people are looking very down. And I actually hadn't thought about it like this until I did until I spoke to Francis yesterday. But this is you know, very helpful to understand what we've got here. We know the correlation between the dollar and Bitcoin, of course, should be evident and apparent to all of you. When we look at Bitcoin, we're looking at it against the dollar. One reason we've seen Bitcoin weakness is, of course, on the back end of dollar strength. Now, one thing that I want to highlight, you can really just see we go down, Bitcoin goes up, obviously after March 2020, and then there's an adverse correlation to the other side. Very, very apparent. You guys can bring these charts up for yourself. But one thing I want to highlight that people don't really seem to mention and pay attention to is, get rid of the RSI there, just the fact that the last time the dollar was up here, remember you had your March 2020 event, and of course we saw massive amounts of proliferation of the money supply, which got flooded into assets. March 2020 is still, in my opinion, one of the most significant events that people don't give it credit for. The last time the dollar was up here, this region here, Bitcoin was down here. Yeah. So Bitcoin was round about round about your 4 to your 10K range. It's 4 times higher than the last time the dollar was at this kind of a level. That's perspective for you right there. And that's why a long-term view really pays, because this technology is growing and growing, getting more and more adoption, and is going to continue to do exactly that. You know, it's absolutely doing what it was meant to. Short term, you know, you can say, okay, well, it's going down when we have high inflation, so why isn't there a correlation there? And I was actually looking at Bitcoin rather, not pessimistically, but sort of confused potentially of why it is we aren't seeing Bitcoin absolutely, you know, moon when we have such high inflation, as that's really what it was here to do, to highlight the failings of the current fiat systems that we use. But it's obvious. It's very institutional driven, and that's why you see the huge correlation between the NASDAQ and Bitcoin. And ultimately, to put things into perspective, which we're trying to do here for you, you know, Bitcoin's doing just fine, guys. Yes, if you bought at the top, you bought at the top. But in the grand scheme of things, you've only had to be here for 2 years, and you're 4x up, and you wouldn't have had to do anything. You know, and I think this is going to be a trend that we see continue. We see continuous cycles within Bitcoin, not talking about the 4-year cycle 4-year cycle here. I'm talking about cycles in sort of boom and busts, but on a more short-term time frame and more compact. And ultimately, we see continuation in the price of Bitcoin. I think that's the route that I'm looking at over the long term, which is why I'm optimistic on the crypto space, however cautious at the moment, given everything that's going on. Let's talk about this. We're all going to make it. Crypto bosses say the tide is turning on regulation. Binance CEO Changpeng Zhao, or CZ, said the tide is definitely turning on crypto regulation, with governments beginning to take a more positive approach to the sector. The US and Britain have both announced moves to bring regulatory oversight to the nuanced crypto market. Absolutely. This is coming. It's very funny how they all kind of change their tune at once. We showed you yesterday that BlackRock are actually now the main custodial for USDC. Well, they wouldn't be getting involved in this industry. All your big institutions would not be getting involved in this industry. And all your big sort of financial managers and hedge fund guys wouldn't be transferring to the crypto industry if they thought this was going to be something that was killed by regulatory clarity. Regulations are actually going to favor the cryptocurrency market in terms of adoption. In terms of your freedoms and your liberties, they will definitely hinder it. This notion that Bitcoin is the road to freedom, I'm not sure is one that I buy. Yes, I can see certain advantages of Bitcoin over the monetary system, but I think if Bitcoin was allowed to flourish without regulation and driven by the people, yeah, you could definitely see it as a kind of liberating thing. But the second your governments constrain it, it becomes essentially under their control. And it's very ironic that we're looking for permission for a permissionless system. Anyway, Bitcoin institutions buying could be a big narrative again as 30k Bitcoin leaves Coinbase. There's not actual evidence for this. We are seeing a continuous outflow of Bitcoin from exchanges. Coinbase is, of course, one of the biggest exchanges. And this is, you know, something that we're seeing continue. You can see that here with the blue line. And ultimately, you know, this is something that we're going to... Bitcoin's becoming more and more scarce. However, the supply shock doesn't come in until the demand ramps up. So hodlers don't affect the Bitcoin price until there's a demand influx and the supply just simply isn't there because people are hodling it. So these articles are very often very misleading because we don't know who bought that 30k Bitcoin. It's likely that it was an institution. Given the sort of volume, institutional buys might be a big narrative again because the executive order did not create any hurdles. Yeah, back to regulation. We've been saying this time and time again on the channel that regulatory clarity is really going to drive the next wave of adoption as it gives a green light to the kind of broader financial landscape to actually look at crypto and adopt it. Amazon CEO, crypto will become bigger. NFTs will grow very significantly. This is certainly interesting. I do believe over time that we'll see crypto become bigger. I expect that NFTs will continue to grow very significantly. Absolutely. You know, when we look, and we've said this time and time again, we're at $1.8 trillion. This gets to the tens, if not into the future, hundreds of trillions, in my opinion. We have a failing, and we're going to talk about it on the weekend with Francis. We have a failing financial system that is debt-based, and that debt is becoming harder to service and less valuable. and they don't really have, you know, it's becoming a bit of a joke. The very fiat systems that we use are crumbling before our eyes, ladies and gentlemen, and crypto has popped up at the right time, as if by magic. But we'll be talking about that more on the weekend. This is the last article I have for you, and it's to do with, of course, North Korea. US officials tie North Korea's Lazarus hacker to 625 million crypto theft. Axie Infinity's, this is of course the Axie Infinity's exploit. This is significant, and the ramifications of this will not show up just yet, but certainly will later on down the line, because, you know, this is going to be one reason why they regulate the cryptocurrency space, and you know, you might not have people being able to freely innovate. They might have to go through certain steps or legislation before they can launch, because the US are going to use these sort of events as reasons to regulate it in a manner that is, what's the word? Sort of restricts entrepreneurship, because they're going to make things, you know, we've seen this happen time and time again. So I'm rambling on now, guys, but that is really all I have for you in this video. Don't panic, don't worry. Long term, I think we're going to be absolutely fine. Short term, you know, it is what it is. We're driven by a number of factors. Ultimately, I can see further downside, but I'm in this for the long haul. I still hold all my cryptos. I have more cash than normal sat on the sidelines, or I should say USDT. And UST, which I farm APYs on. We're going to do a stablecoin video, because for me, it's a no-brainer. You can have your cash sat in a bank, or you can have your cash sat to a stablecoin that can be farming 9-10% APYs, which makes a lot more sense than sort of losing money consistently to inflation with a measly interest rate in a bank account. All I have for you in this video, guys. If you've enjoyed this content, a like is always appreciated. So is a comment, and I look forward to seeing each and every one of you in the next YouTube video. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Enjoy your Fridays.